Welcome to Devalued with Mike and Caroline, the place where we talk about art and money and how creative people are navigating the ever-changing landscape of trying to make a living for their work.
We're going to be interviewing all types of creative people, and we'll be talking about all types of issues that creative people face. We hope you'll get something out of it. We're excited to welcome you to Devalued. Hey, Michael.
Oh.
Hey, Michael.
Oh, hi, Caroline. I'm subbing in for Michael Ackley today.
Yes, we're pleased to have you. Thank you for stepping in. Tell the people who we're talking to today.
We are talking to Jason Moon Wilkins and Emily Young of the Nashville public radio station, WNXP, the Nashville Experience.
I listen to them, I guess, every day when I get in my car.
Yeah, I also listen to them daily. Love what they're doing. They've been around for 4 years now, still kind of a young station, but they have a lifetime of experience behind them.
Great DJs, very hip, very cool, very community-minded, and I really enjoyed hearing their perspectives on the industry, on how artists can reach them. There's a lot of good information and perspective in this interview, I think.
Yeah, they really brought some practical insights as well as just like some industry talk as well. Pretty awesome, if I do say so ourselves.
I agree. You want to get into it?
Let's get into it. This is Devalued, the podcast. I'm Michael Eads, subbing in for Michael Ackley. He had a long work call. Sorry, Michael. But fortunately, they have two Michaels on the team, so I'm going to step right in.
It works well.
Caroline, of course, here as always. And we are joined by two very special guests today. Please introduce yourselves. We'll start with you.
I'm Emily Young, longtime, lifelong Nashvillian, and I am the events director at WNXP.
I'm Jason Moon Wilkins, 31 years into Nashville, and the program director and brand manager for WNXP.
I like the finger quotes you did there.
Yeah.
I'm still uncomfortable with this title, obviously.
After
but
31 years, do you get to say you're a Nashvillian, or
I've wondered
you never
about this.
get to say it?
I think I get to say that to people who are younger than 31.
I just got you beat then. I just snuck in right in the nick of time.
Amazing.
I think Luke's been here not that long, my husband, and his Instagram handle is Luke from Nashville. He's just decided he is part of it now. So
I also think
you can do that.
when you're ingrained in the community so much that it would be impossible to think of Nashville without you, you can call yourself a Nashvillian. And I think you've earned that title.
Yeah.
Wow. Breaking news.
High praise.
Thank you, Emily Young.
I grew up in Franklin, and my wife will not let me say I'm from Nashville.
Oh, you can say that. I can say that. You can say that. You can say that.
It's one big Nashville at this point.
Yeah.
I mean,
Also, Nashville to me is Middle Tennessee because I grew up here and no one lived, unless you had a lot of money, no one lived like on Belmont Boulevard or something, like right in the hub of Nashville. When you said you're from Nashville, you said, oh, where from?
Right.
Thinking they would say Madison, Franklin, Mount Juliet, and I'm like, yeah, that's all the same. That's still Nashville. You
One
can
big
count it.
Nashville.
You
I
can
like
count it.
Okay. Wow.
It's very inclusive of you. A lot of people are not that way. Well, what do you guys think? The basic question at the root of this whole thing.
Yeah.
What do you think about the relationship between music and money?
Wow. Like, you mean overall in general?
Yeah. We start real big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, this today on the radio played the Everything is Free song from Gillian Welch, who
I cry every time.
yeah, it's and they really nailed it on that song about how it's so true that we would do it anyway, right? Like that every artist who I've ever known, and I was in that boat myself for a while, and a musician, like there is no way to stop this thing that happens within you and then wants to come out. So then it all becomes, how do you get from that point of creation to people? And I do think that there are parts of the business, I mean, we could spend a lot of time on this, that were built out that don't really have anything to do with art. They don't have anything to do with music, and they don't have anything to do with the people receiving the music. There's sort of infrastructure around music that was created that costs money. And so therefore, more systems in place, more money needs to be extracted from the consumer to support the system, right? And there's a lot of systems like that, and music being one of them. And so when people talk, can I say the S word?
Oh, you can say it all.
Oh, we're not on the radio today,
right.
baby.
Yeah, fly.
I'm so not used to this.
Get filthy, Jason.
I'm about to let him fly now.
shoot.
It's about to get real now.
No, but when people talk shit about the music business, which they do a lot, in song and in real life, you understand it, but it's also like they're talking about parts of the business that sometimes people who are even in those parts aren't technically really participating in. So I'm always a bit of an apologist for it because there's so many of us who join into this thing for that basic, like we want to get that art from point A to point B. We want to help the artist find an audience. But at that very root of it, then it becomes, to answer your question more directly, does it have value? Yeah, I think it does.
So they can coexist.
I think so.
Emily?
I think it's getting harder to coexist, or the importance has switched a little bit. That I feel like it used to be, the trends followed the art of this music is so good, and everyone wants to be like this so good thing. And now there's kind of this. I don't want to just use TikTok, but that's a great example of there's just this machine and thing that decides what's good. And so everyone's like, great, we need to make that thing that's going to be popular so that we can make money. And it's just so different. It used to be we create this art, we play it, and we hope people like it and they receive it. And then cool, if we make money, great. And now there's this band, Bodega, who released an exceptional record this year about just that. They have a line that says, are we artists or are we advertisers? And that's really what that's what it is to be a musician now. You have to think, to be successful, quote unquote, you have to think big picture. It isn't just a song. Okay, well, how are we going to market the song? How am I going to make a trendy little dance to this song? It's just become so much more complicated, and money has just muddied it so much more that I think we're really lucky that there are still artists willing to make art for the sake of making art. But so many aren't. So many are just chasing the money, and it's just it's a sad time, I think, to look at it that way.
That's amazing. It sounds like the internet had a big hand in democratizing the reach of music, and therefore it made it like you want to chase a trend instead of just like, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was very hard to make a record. So you really, you would be better off to do something original that felt true to yourself than like something that you're chasing a trend. But there was still trend chasers then too.
Always.
Sure. Yeah.
Always.
There's always been
Did the internet
something.
just make it insanely like multitudes of 100 from what it used to be?
No, I think it's interesting when you follow, do you remember the long tail idea, right? Do you remember this?
Sure.
So, this is concept of when streaming was, first really starting to be popularized, this idea that, okay, what's going to be great about this is that it's going to, the rising tide is going to lift all the boats, and it's not going to be just so top heavy. But I think this is one of those things, I don't know if we can truly even have the full perspective now. I think it's going to take us another 5 or 6, 7 years to really have a view on how this has panned out. But what it has panned out to do is, like you were saying, it's not that different from the 50s or the 70s or the 90s, where it's still sort of haves and have nots, Right. And is that, we want to get really base on it. Is that just the nature of capitalism, to create haves and have nots, and
Yes.
music is just part of that?
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah.
It just feels, because we have such instant access to everything all the time, that it feels so much greater than, like, the people following the trends feel so much greater. And to your point, it's a heck of a lot easier to release a record, to make a record, to release a record.
Yep.
You can record it in your home, you can put it out on your own, you can do this whole thing. And as we know, that's not always been the case. So it feels like you're getting more and more of those trends. And that's partially just because it's so much easier to put things out into the world.
Wasn't there that statistic recently that there are more
Yes.
songs put out in one day now than there used to be put out in a year?
Yeah.
I heard something, and do not hold me to this. Maybe I will bleep this on the edit because the number is so. I heard 10,000 songs a day were uploaded to the streaming services. Can that be true?
Yes. Have you heard some really bad songs? They didn't say 10,000 perfect songs were
I know,
uploaded.
that just like that. Is there AI and bots involved with that number?
Yes.
That just
Probably.
seems
There are.
insane.
Yes.
Yeah. Gosh. And all of it's not even songs. Sometimes it's literally like, that is now
ASMR.
Oh, I mean, some of that stuff qualifies as a song, which is just a copyright, thing waiting to happen. But I mean, when it first started, when some of the streaming services first rolled out, it wasn't so completely democratized. You had to work with a distributor to actually get your stuff up on Spotify or Deezer or whatever. And I think there's a little bit of value in that. Yes, the moral base of who I am says everyone should be able to do everything, but I do think that it does. It's not even muddying the waters at this point. It's like it's creating new oceans that can make it difficult because not everything is created equal there, And sure. I think there is value in artists having to work and figure out, all the things that work about their music, before just putting it on wax, so to speak. But I don't know. But some people hit it out of the park right out, Lil Nas X made a song and it was a great song, but for every Lil Nas X, there are 9,999 others a day that are not that. Yeah.
We also have jobs within the music industry. So we clearly do appreciate when things make money and we depend on that to make a living.
Yeah.
So.
This could go so many amazing directions. I want to talk about like the lack of like pop culture or the like fracturing of pop culture, just because I think with the landscape where you're having 10,000 new songs a day, like what is pop culture? Like Beyonce's and Taylor Swift's are like outliers, major outliers.
Yes.
Like, but I also want to like rewind and talk about like specifically what your jobs are and like how radio plays into this and like kind of frame like if we're talking about being a musician, we're talking about streaming services and we're talking about internet and all that. I think a lot of times radio is now getting lost.
Yep.
And it gets thought of as like, oh yeah, there's still radio. Like you can, is that like Pandora or whatever? But it's like, no, you can like really reach people and really create a community and a culture through radio. And that I'm not saying that because you two work at a great radio station here in Nashville. There's so many examples of that across the country. I mean, like KEXP is a great example. Like, what is the one in New Jersey? That's like
FMU.
Yeah, FMU.
FMU is a good one.
There's so many incredible radio stations and so many that I don't even know about in like Arizona and Montana. Like, I'm sure that they exist. So I just want to rewind a little bit and be like, okay, how does the radio station work?
How does it work
and what
these
do you
days?
both do there specifically? And really talk about your brand manager role.
It sounds really important.
Also, I just want y'all to know that's
Super
the first
important.
I've ever heard of that. It's right now on this mic with the finger quotes and all. I was like, oh, this is new. All right.
This is what like upper management we have been talking. Honestly, it's like, and I hate that. I hate that term, but no one's really interested in this. But the reason that you come up with it now is that program director was really about like creating content and being on the air and all that kind of stuff like that. And at this point, WNXP is a radio station, but it is also a YouTube channel and it's an Instagram thing. There, I met a bartender. I told Emily about this. He really only interacts with us on Instagram. That's it. Doesn't really listen to the radio station, doesn't really listen to radio in general, and he's not even necessarily clicking through to go like watch a full live session of something. He's like, I like your clips on Instagram. But so to that end, like what these days, a lot of what we are doing and my primary job is to like set the concept and make sure that it is consistent and that what we're doing in all these places both fits what we're trying to do and fits the mission because it is a public radio station and a nonprofit. So it's that. Thus, the the secondary title is that. But what I can say about there's so many ways to go with where radio is now, and I think the narrative is that radio's dead, right? And that's comfortable with that because part of it is dead. And when we say it's like define radio then.
Right.
What are you talking about? And most of the time that is talking about either top 40 radio or some people it's like what alternative radio was and has not been for a really long time. And that is a whole other subject on how it arrived at its death, which it is pretty dead. But so much of it is corporatization and monoculture in a bad way. But it's also the death of monoculture, what you were just referring to as like what is familiar to everyone,
Right.
and how niche things have become. And there's more to say on that, but I will say, like, where stations like ours have actually flourished in the last several years. You know, you've seen down in Austin, in Philadelphia, all these other places where, despite lower consumption of radio in general, they have grown, is because exactly what you said. They're focused on community first, number one, and building community within that community. So it's a niche product at this point, whereas it used to be the mainstream, but it still has a lot of value, and a lot of that value shows up in artist development, which has sort of been abandoned by labels in general. So they sort of thrust it onto certain media like ours, and the live element, you know, which is a lot of where Emily works is, you know, we still get paid a decent amount of money from promoters and venues and things like that, because over our, you know, only 4 years in existence now, we have been proven to help them get the word out about shows or about a new release. And so it's not everyone who's listening to the radio, but the people who are, and it's a pretty wide demographic, they are the ones who are actively looking for new music and wanting to know when so-and-so is playing town. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's also the personal element of it. You know, it's not an algorithm. Right. It is not just going to shuffle something and spit it out to you. These are real life human beings who are curating something for another human being. And I think that regardless of all the things that have happened in the world in development, people still want that human to human contact. And we see that even with, it's clearly a model that works, because we see that with streaming services circling back, being like, we're creating this new thing.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to broadcast live with a host. And you're like, oh, you mean radio? You mean the thing that has existed long before you? Like, we know.
Can we all toast to the death of the car thing?
Oh,
Spotify. Car thing. Pour one out for you.
But it's so silly.
You tried so hard to be the radio.
Right. And so we know that this model works, and they know it works. You know, they've tried to recreate it in a backwards way. But I think it's the human element, and it is community. And that's honestly what I feel like my whole job is helping build and cultivate that. And I feel very lucky, because this is my hometown. There's few things I care about more than this music community and the people in it. And it's our opportunity to, yes, elevate these artists, but also bring together these like-minded individuals in a way that feels very genuine and special. And it feels so the antithesis of capitalism and all the ways that people are trying to churn money and make this into a money-making scheme. I feel like we have this beautiful gift to be able to be like, yeah, okay, I mean, money's cool. We need it to exist, but we care a lot more about the human beings that are involved in this whole thing.
What is your specific role? Like, what are you doing there? Like, I've heard your job title, but I know there's so much more involved.
A lot of things. Yes, I am a host, but I feel like that's lower on the list. Although these days, I feel like maybe not. But I feel I've been filling in a lot. So I feel today, especially, I'm like, well, I don't know. I was on the radio for 5 hours, but so we do these live sessions. So I book all of those live sessions. Sweet. Jason helps me out with curating when sometimes I'm like, is this a good idea, or is this just my personal taste? Which happens to be exceptional, if you know. So we help. So I produce all of those that we do, but I also create all of our in-person events. So basically anything that's happening human to human in real life, that is where I come in. So we also are seeking out like-minded partnerships. So finding other venues or people within the community, whether it's bars or restaurants or businesses that kind of share the same mission, meeting with them and finding ways that we can collaborate together and create these special experiences. So that includes some obvious things like booking shows and partnering with shows and promoters to either promote a show, or we are outright booking something. It's other things like we host music trivia once a month. And it's funny, some of those things you roll the dice, you're like, I don't know if this will work. And people love it. And you see the same individuals most weeks. Everyone is so happy to be there. And it's just, I don't know, it's really special to put on these things, to bring this community together and see people experience joy in a time that feels kind of dark and heavy. So all in-person things, that's where I come in.
There are quite a few of them as well.
Yes.
Nice job.
There are. Thank you.
Are you guys mostly funded by individual donors?
It's sliced up. We were just having this discussion because, you know, everyone's having a discussion after, you know, Elon Musk comes out and says he wants to defund
Right.
the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. And
Chill, super cool.
yeah.
What a guy. What a guy.
And so, when that word is coming out, it does offer us, we're going to be doing some fundraising next week. And we were just talking about how to discuss this. And part of that discussion is to help people understand the funding, that it isn't just, yes, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting writes every public radio station that is part of that network a check. And for us, we have an NPR music station, so it's like, multiple stations and all that, and it's worth X dollars. And that is 5% of our budget, I think, grand total for both stations. The most important point is that it's a network that they also provide support. One of the things that most directly impacts us is they pay the licensing fees for BMI, ASCAP, CSAC. So that's a huge chunk, and that's something that we would have to take on as an individual station, as opposed to them being able to take care of it network wide. So there are things that are part of that funding that are really important. So sorry, it's very much on my mind, but the rest of it, the pie chart is, we have corporate support and underwriting, the messages that you hear. And then you have the individual donors that vary greatly in size. Some folks are $5, some people are 5,000. And that's what helps make this model sustainable in this time, I think, and why there's still hope for public media to survive in this fragmented world, is because you're not so reliant upon one revenue source.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I refuse to believe that radio is dying. It cannot happen. I have been called a cursed shopper, though. I think I like things that other people don't seem to like. Everything I like in the store doesn't.
It's okay.
Get picked up again.
That's already been happening. So
I feel like, how many more years am I going to hear radio's dying?
Yeah.
And it's not dead yet. And we launched a station in 2020, which seems pretty insane. So
It's very insane.
clearly we were confident enough that it's still alive and well enough, and that we're in a being in Nashville, music city, we're really hope, and it's proven successful thus far, but the hope is that we have people that know the value and the service that we're offering.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it's also whenever something changes, you're like, oh, it's done. It can't adapt. There's no way. It's like,
Right.
oh, well, I mean, to your point earlier, like the radio in the 90s doesn't exist anymore, but radio in 2020 is just different. This is a different thing, and it's a different model. And I think it is taking on way more interesting avenues.
Well, we're picking up some of the slack that, I have worked in, so whereas you're a cursed shopper, I'm a cursed crew member, I guess, because I've been on so many different sinking ships. The music business, the print business,
don't
the
put our
radio
curse on the
business.
list right now.
Oh, it's too late for that. Y'all should have thrown me overboard early. Mutiny. So, sorry, I've been listening to a podcast about history and naval history and I'm not even into it, but it's just interesting.
I'm expecting at least one more naval term before the end of the episode.
Yes. Starboard. Done. Click. Check. No more onto my to-do list. But where in the heck were we going with that?
Sorry.
No.
You join Dying Industries.
Yeah, I joined Dying Industries. Well, one of them has been, journalism in general has been taking huge hits. Music journalism has been taking huge hits. And that is one of those places where we can start filling in the gaps a little bit. We've just been rearranging people internally. We only have 7 full-time staff members, but dedicating more resources to how do you cover music news. In a city like Nashville, you need to have someone more dedicated to it. We had a great, the Nashville scene had the Cream for a while and treated music more like news. And they have less staff now. The Tennessean has cut their people back, And so how do you start filling in some of those gaps? So to your point, it's is it where it was? Is it the same kind of thing where I'm just showing up and I'm a DJ and then I pick some songs and I talk to a record label and we go do a show? That was the job in 1996.
Right.
Right. That's not the job now.
But to your point about being, quote unquote, brand manager, we are more than a radio station. And
Right.
as other independent entities within the music industry have crumbled, we've kind of stepped up and filled that role. I mean, we watched what happened with Pitchfork and some of these other indie publications. And we're like, well, okay, another one bites the dust. Time for us to maybe see what we can do here. I mean, we're losing more and more opportunities or more platforms for artists to endorse themselves and, you know, show things off. Right now, we're just kind of limited to social media, and that feels scammy too. So what can we do? What purpose can we serve? And it is interviewing them, and it's doing this editorial work. It's also doing these live sessions. I mean, we're doing everything we can to boost these artists. And that's not necessarily what the role was for radio before. It was like, here's a new song, press play. And we're kind of looking a little more bigger picture with an artist.
Totally.
You got something?
I always got something.
On your mind?
What you got?
What's on your mind?
I wanted to sort of frame the conversation around like as if how does an artist interact with you? Like, not necessarily label, not an A&R, not a promoter, but like, let's even use a local musician as an example. Someone who has a record or a song, and they're like, I want to promote it. To your point earlier, like, oh, I've got to make an advertisement for my thing. But really, you just want to like get the word out. That's the whole point of releasing your music, is you want to get the word out and have people listen to it. You're going to post on Instagram and on Blue Sky and Threads or whatever the thing is.
Right.
And I think people forget to submit it to the radio.
Oh my gosh. If we could put this part at the very beginning of the episode.
Also, even if they have labels, that doesn't always help either.
Right.
And we don't even have to get into how many labels have cut their radio departments, and then we're just left floating around like, well, where the hell do we get this music from? Who do I even ask? Who's our contact? Now they got rid of these other people.
Oh, they cut radio, they cut marketing. It's like we were talking about this the other day. There were, just this week, there were 5 records that came out on various different levels. You know, one was a major label, one was an independent, one was a major independent. None of them sent their music. And some of that is due to, people forget. Look, it's December. People in the music business stop working. But some of it is also, man, we were really starting to feel the effects of all these cuts that have been happening at Universal and Warner and all these kind of places, and even on the independent side. So it's difficult. But to answer your question, like, how do people, reach us and how do we interact with them? There's so many different avenues. I remember asking you this question at some point, like, how do you find music? And you were talking about the different ways that, using the Nashville hashtag and Bandcamp, so that things pop up. I've got so many different, and we all do, spinning plates of suggestions coming in, and whether that is by humans, people that or it might be a promoter, it might be the band themselves, it might be you, or it's listening to a playlist like everybody else, or, hearing it on, it pop up on an ad or something. There's like, your ears are open all the time for those opportunities to arrive. And I will say that there's one part of the business that I think has stayed very similar and that I still very much trust, which is that, for every Lil Nas X who does come out of nowhere, and out of the bedroom, like most of the folks who arrive finally ready for us to help them have found their way to someone else within the community, whether that's on a national level or a local level, who are then helping champion them. Because it is almost impossible, especially in Nashville, to be good and to be on stage and to do something and have no one come after you and want to help you in some way, or want to work with you, or try to leech off of you.
Or even a friend that's like also in the, in the same realm as you, that's like, this is so good, you got to hear it.
Yeah. So it is so rare. And an artist, artists coming through, and we're talking to them before a show. Have you, who was it? Was it Waxahachie that was talking about, I knew I was going to space on it. Brendan Wadle.
Oh, I was like, I don't know why you're looking at me. I'm not gonna know.
Local artists who I had at that point not heard. Right. It's like working at the Belcourt, but put out this really cool song, and so it comes at you in all these different ways, and ultimately, still the filter is, do we think this is really good? Do we think it's legit? And do we want to share it with people? And sometimes that's folks with 64 followers, for the recent local band, or 6 million, and I do try to make sure that we don't differentiate. I think that's part of, like, a big philosophical thing, and Emily's heard me talk about this a lot, is that I believe it's really important to put the local artists on the same level as the national artist, and so therefore you want to make sure it is of that same quality. And it doesn't. I don't mean necessarily recording quality. Like this song, if I'm going to play it from this to this, it's not a drop off, and it doesn't feel like a pat on the back. Like, oh, good job for a local band. You know, it's like, no, this is good.
Like you could play this band, and Tame Impala could come up after, and you wouldn't be like, oh, that was jarring difference. You would be like, oh, that was all right. Respect. And I actually, that is, I remember you saying that to me, and I was like, that's how this should be done, because anyone can say, we champion locals, and play just everything without any filter, without any, criticism. And like, that is our job also, to be somewhat critics, if you will. We're not necessarily going to play something and be like, man, wasn't that terrible? But we're not going to play anything we think is bad. And we're not going to play anything that,
just because we're friends with somebody.
Right. That just because we're...
to be frank,
this is for all of my friends. This is for all of my friends listening to this podcast. No, I'm just kidding. We're not going to play someone just because... We're not even going to play a song. Look, an artist could be great, and we think they're great. They put out a crappy song. We're not going to play the crappy song.
That's great.
So,
as a listener, I'm always super pleasantly surprised when I hear a cool song that I haven't heard before. I Shazam while driving. I'm so sorry. But I Shazam while driving, and it's someone that I know or know of in the scene. I'm like, oh, that's so cool that they're existing in this medium that could be anyone. It could be a Tame Impala, but it's someone local. And then I'm like, oh, guess I'm a fan. I didn't even know it. That's great.
That's great.
We take that same approach when it comes to putting on shows and booking live sessions and things too. Like, there's also folks that have really great songs, but they're not quite ready for a bigger stage. And we're like, cool. All right. Well, we'll stick around. We're with you. We're with you. We're like playing the long game with you. We'll go to a few shows, wait till you got a band, you're figuring it out a little bit, and then locked in. All right. Then you can come play a show for us. So there's a level of, you talked about how labels will kind of abandon this artist development idea. We haven't. That's kind of our main thing. We find someone and we're going to stick with it and hope that we're a part of their journey as they grow. And maybe they remember that and cut us a fat check when they sell out Bridgestone Arena. No.
You still want to be aspirational, right? You still want to be something that people shoot for. It means something. And that's been some of honestly, the most meaningful things that have happened since we've done this have been artists. They'll make a video of themselves hearing their song on the radio for the first time. And there was an artist recently did this. She was crying, and but you could see it was like, oh, okay. There was a sense of validation in that, and we take that seriously too. Yeah.
It feels awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not a musician at all, but I will send you all music that I am releasing through YK, and it's like, oh, you're playing this song. Like, this reached people who hear music literally all day, every day. Yeah. And they were like, we want to share this with other people. Yeah. And it just feels incredible. It feels great every time. And I think more artists need to just send it in.
Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. The point
Circling back to the send it in.
The point was, please send us a WAV file,
specifically a WAV file,
and very specifically clean. You can do your edits yourself, because if we have to do the edits and we have to take the shits out, it doesn't sound as good.
And it's gonna get, if we can't play it immediately, we're like, oh, we'll do that edit tomorrow, and
then it gets
and then we'll do it. We'll do that edit 2 days from now.
Context too.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's a big service that y'all provide for listeners, is context for the music, not just musically, by putting it into a cool set of music that kind of lets it make sense, but also the story of the artist. I really enjoy your Artist of the Month features. Those are super cool and helpful for me to get attached more on an emotional level to the music and help me understand what it's about from their perspective.
Absolutely. That is, one of the things. I took a little side journey for 5 years into the NPR news side, and one of the pieces that I felt was really important to bring back to this when we started it was exactly that. Whenever we can, whether it's the DJs and we're talking about it, or the artists themselves, to be able to tell stories that then weave directly into that music, because then it just gives you this deeper appreciation. And it also, from a music discovery standpoint, helps you get out of the algorithm. The algorithm is going to feed you whatever. It does it to me, it does it to everybody, but the storytelling can set you up for something that you never would have chosen otherwise. Yeah.
And often, I mean, sometimes the story makes me appreciate the music more. Like if I had just heard that without context, I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty good. And then when you hear what went into it and the inspiration behind it, you're like, oh, never mind. I'm in. I'm sold. Am I crying? What's going on? But I could do an entire podcast on the perfect radio pitch. How brief is your description and your context? What is the file size? What does this look like?
We might take you up on that.
Okay,
Honestly, I love
pretty
it. That's super helpful. And, you know, when you've been in the music industry for as long as a lot of us have, you kind of take that knowledge for granted. And people starting out just like don't really know that.
Well, yeah, it gets into that narrative too, right? Like of if they think that radio is not part of the menu for them, then it's just not top of mind. And so they don't even think to send, which ultimately is just send the email, you know, or send me a link. It's not, that part's not that difficult. You know, if you're an instant reward, like I'm going to get back to you immediately, as Michael knows, that's not always going to happen. But
that's when they email me and say, I reached out to Jason. I'm like, yeah, okay, I got it.
But it is the first step, you know, it is like get it out there and you know, at least get it in our hands, because otherwise we can't really, we don't stream Spotify on the radio. You know, that you sending me a link to that doesn't do me much good.
Yeah. Same with people like, oh, preview my new record. And I'm like, I need a downloadable link because if I like this, then we want to play
then we're gonna play it immediately.
We'll do it immediately. Yeah. I think another special thing when people talk about radio dying, and to your point, the importance to me is community. And that's what makes us so special and why radio, I think, will continue to live, is that we are also human beings. Like there shouldn't be any type of intimidation to be like, hey, listen to my song. Look at us. We're just chilling right now. You know what I mean? It's not like, you know, we're some fancy schman. We're just human beings. So I think there's also this level of like, oh, is this weird? And you're like, no, it's really not. It doesn't need to be formal. Just like send us what we need. We'll listen.
Right. Yeah, I think people get intimidated maybe. Or I mean, if they're thinking like, oh, like, you know, see you out at a show, or like think to send something in, there's so much imposter syndrome, particularly fueled by social networks and just, you know.
I have imposter syndrome. All right. That's what I would say. I'd be like, yeah, okay, well,
Totally.
same. Let's do it. Probably everyone in this room, we're like, how do we get paid? Why are we getting paid to do this? How is this happening? How have we pulled this off?
It's true. I totally have it myself. I think, how do artists sort of like think of, I don't know, we're having this conversation about art and money and radio. Should artists think about money in that context with radio, or do you not? And it's just like a promotional tool to like spread the word, and then people maybe come to shows, maybe buy a record or a shirt, or just simply be aware of you. Yeah.
I mean, there is look, it doesn't impact most of the people that we play because they're not getting to the number of airplay in our world spins instead of streams, the number of spins that would result in like a big check from the PROs, BMI, ASCAP, CSEC. But at the same time, you know, this is pretty common knowledge is out there. Radio pays a lot more than streaming. You know, so if you do have success in radio land, you are going to get, you know, a check within that. So there is that value, you know, that's important to state. But most of the value at this point is less about that and more about the impact it can have in these other ways, in raising your awareness, in connecting with audiences, especially with the type of music, not music, type of format and the way that we do it. Yes, you can get on a playlist and it can help you really, really blow up. So this is not an either or. This is an and. This is, we're also, you know, broadcasting, not monocasting, to an audience that includes lots of different types of people. So your music is then reaching people that your social ad did not, you know, that your appearance as an opener for artist X did not. So it's a piece of the menu that still has value. And we've seen it, you know, now we're 4 years in, we've seen artists who we were helping out in an early stage, that have then now risen, and we have been a part of the story, and sometimes bigger and sometimes smaller parts. But I mean, there are people who have shown appreciation. I mean, there's artists, huge artists, who very much appreciate that we were very early in on them, you know, and anyway.
Well, and there's still artists that have become super successful that can trace it back to radio. We did a session with Alt J, obviously a huge band. They were in town playing, I think it was Municipal. And they had found out that day that one of the singles that they had just released was #1 on the chart, like AAA charts. And he made a point to be like, oh, radio is why we have a career. No one in America, like, we wouldn't be anything here. They had a couple radio songs and that reached enough people. And he straight up was like, no, we credit that for why we're successful in the States and why we can come play venues like that. So you hear that and it's just impossible to not think that radio can have that impact in some way. And I mean, we see that in a hyper local market when a band plays a small venue. Say they come to town, they play, Blue Room, 250 cap, that's their thing. And maybe there's half the room's full, but they put out a song and we love it. We start supporting this artist and spinning it. And now in Nashville specifically, where people have grown to love and appreciate them, they can play a larger room and therefore get a bigger check. And so there are ways that it, trickles down the line that then becomes dollar signs. It's just not a instant thing.
Well, and one thing it's very real in Nashville and very different than even some other places because there is a public radio network, so to speak, and it is not in the same way that Odyssey, which is the big, giant alternative one where everyone plays the same things. We all play a lot of different things, but there's some things we agree on, but we all talk to each other, and it is a very, very different and supportive group than the world I used to live in, in the old days. Names shall not be mentioned.
I was holding my breath. I was like, oh, no, he's about to reveal some secrets.
Someone that Michael and I both know.
That's another podcast.
It is. That's a series. But you get word of mouth between that too, right? Okay, so this person in Austin is supporting this, and it does matter because I know them, I know their tastes, Let's check out what they're checking out. So that's another ripple effect you get from it. And the very direct thing that happens in Nashville, though, is that because we have such a high concentration of both artists and music business people here, then we have direct impacts on artists' careers. There are people, big bands, who have brought out openers because they heard the song on our radio station. Nice. They added them to their playlist. We have seen these bands later on. They're like, oh my God, you turned me on to so-and-so. And we brought them out on tour in Australia. I don't even know if the bands know this sometimes, but we do know that bands who do know that they got their agent through us or, management or a collaboration because an artist heard their song and reached out. And that's important too. You're building connections through that community that exists already, that otherwise wouldn't have existed.
You're right. We have definitely, spun artists that then an agent reaches out or a manager and they're like, they said they heard me on the radio and now they want to work with me. And they're like, yeah, you're welcome. We did that. That was the plan all along.
I have a question about a term that I think is outdated, but maybe is not that outdated. Maybe it's just different now. Pay to play.
Oh yeah.
That's not outdated.
I'm curious.
Payola.
Payola. What's the situation? I mean, obviously you guys don't do that. I mean, your taste is too important to you to do that. I know that about you and I appreciate that about you. Which is why I listen to you, but I was just wondering if that was a thing.
Yeah, I mean, in all sincerity, we do have to be careful about, I don't want to insinuate anything about anyone directly about this because it is illegal still to do that. There are workarounds and there are recent articles in Billboard magazine, if you'd like to read them, about people who thought they had found workarounds and are now find themselves in legal trouble. There are people that we know take money to make sure and play a song. And here, let me lead with empathy on this a little bit. The dissolution of the commercial radio world, much, they shot themselves in the foot on a lot of this, but I still have sympathy for a lot of the lifers who are in there. Their ability to make money got less and less and less and less. And one of the few things that was still around was the payola train that was always there. It never completely went away. It just disguised itself in, let me buy some ads on your station that support this record that you're going to support, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then they do. And there's ones who outright work within and this is well documented, where the term in radio is ads. So what you're always looking for is your song to be added officially. And that means ADD. Yeah. So it's going to be played multiple times during that week. It helps you get on the charts and all that kind of stuff. Well, a well-worn thing, and it still happens within our world and other worlds, is that people will say, here's $500. I need you to add this song. And they may not say it as directly as that, but that's the outcome. Or the same thing happens on a show level. Hey, now that we've got some money for this live show, we're going to give you some money for this live show, and now all of a sudden you'll see the spins increase.
That's a sneaky go around that a lot of folks. That's the think, the like, ooh, we got it, because technically this money came from maybe the promoter or management, quote unquote, to promote this one show, but we're going to beef up those spins as a result. And that
and you'll notice it drops like right after that.
As soon as the show's over, you're like, I never heard that song ever again.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely a thing that still exists. And there's also like an added layer of, and I've always been like, okay, well, when's streaming going to get, when are they going to get this? When is this going to extend more so to get them in trouble?
Has.
Because that is beyond, that's not even, I don't even think they're doing it secretly, really. That one feels extremely obvious. And then you have scammers that are like, hey, if you pay me, I will get you on these playlists. Like, they've found ways to make it even slimier.
And those people are private. You can't find their email addresses and send them a random link. You can't send the curator of the biggest Spotify playlist unless you know that person through some other channel. Whereas radio DJs are at least front facing.
Yeah, no, our emails are out there. But yeah, to answer your question, the easy answer is yes. It's it still exists, and it still exists in direct and indirect ways. We do have empathy for the people who are trying to figure out a way to survive, but ultimately what it does, it's not even just the illegality of the whole thing, whatever. It's more about how you are essentially lying to your audience. And over time, people have realized that too. I think that's part of the story with how radio lost its way. And when I say radio in quotes, the big radio that people think of, is because we knew as listeners they don't really like this, right?
We don't like it, so they're probably not going to like it.
No one is thinking this third single from, I'm not going to name a band.
Oh, man. Every time I think you're going to, every time it's making me feel like I need to censor myself. So like every time he's going to say something, I'm like,
name a band who,
sure,
can play Bridgestone Arena, but whose last record's not very good. Like, you're telling me that you really wanted to play this song? Look, their own fans don't like this song. And they don't play it live, and then as a listener, this. And so that erodes the trust. And over time, because you have other options now, and you don't have to listen to them, you can go and plug in the aux cord or Bluetooth or whatever you want and avoid it completely. And Bale really, it does a disservice to them long term, honestly.
I mean, let's talk about the name of this podcast. It devalues
nice
radio.
Job.
It does, because all of a sudden, this thing that we're supposed to, we're supposed to be curators, we're supposed to be critics, we're supposed to have our finger on the pulse and tell you, hey, this is good, we endorse this. The moment that gets hazy, that trust is gone. And then again, people just tune out and they're like, oh, it's just another single from so-and-so that I don't care about.
Yeah.
I wonder if those regulations will stay in place with Mr. Capitalism in charge.
Well, and that's where I say, like, even if they don't, right? Like, who? Not who cares. I do think it would be very important for everyone to know that is what's happening. Although it's pretty easy to connect the dots if you want to. Just a lot of people don't. But ultimately, it does get back to that idea of you are building trust with the audience. You are talking to them about, their lives, the music. That's the whole idea of radio. And if you're lying to them, it doesn't really matter if you're getting paid or not.
And I mean, even if those regulations went away and we could get paid, we have the integrity
I would never do it.
It's our, to your point, it's our reputation, and we've built our whole lives and careers to be a trusted part of this community. I don't think any of us would be willing. Look, we're not in it for money. We're working in public radio, Like, I think that ship sailed. So we would maintain some level of integrity and just still do it for why we do it, which is...
I walked away from commercial radio in 1997 for multiple reasons, but one of them was because it was just rife with it, and it was gross, and I was like, I don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah, I mean, we see it now, like Twitter followers. You can just buy Twitter followers. Like, look how many people... You could do it on Spotify playlists, all that. All of these social networks are like trickle down versions of that. And I guess there is some utility to them. Like a promoter might look at your number of followers on a thing and therefore book you. But ultimately it's exactly the same as what you're describing, which is like
it's that level of engagement, right?
Yeah.
So like you could have 30,000 people, but if out of those 30,000 people, really, I mean, 29,000 aren't even really participating in that, what does it matter?
Well, and maybe we see that translate in real time when, oh, wow, this TikTok song has all of these plays and this person has all of these followers, and then 10 people show up to the show. So clearly it doesn't translate. It's not, a proper equation of this equals that, because it clearly doesn't. And we've seen that.
Yeah, there's no special sauce, I don't think.
No.
But I think the best thing that you said in that last 15 minutes was part of the menu is radio. It's an and equation, which is like you should be angling for a streaming service and Spotify if you want.
Yeah.
Go on your Instagrams, go on your social networks, and also submit the stuff to radio. Like people seem to pick these paths where they're like, I'm just doing
audience.
Instagram.
Oh, well, I mean, we've all worked in artist management, and you want that. You want to, I would be like, yes, radio is important, but so is your Instagram, unfortunately. So let's make sure we're doing that right. It really is what I think sucks right now, and makes being an artist so hard, is that you are no longer just responsible for creating the art. It's like, all right, well, now you got to chase down this path. You got to go to this one. You got to do this. You've got to create content on top of your art, and it's exhausting. And I think with us, it's like, you just got to give us a good song.
Yeah,
we're the easiest part of this equation, actually.
Just have a wave file.
Just give a wave file, and it's Emily, EMILY, at WNXP.org. It's the org that people mess up. It's the hardest part.
One thing I like at the job I currently have is getting to hear little parts of conversations about artists' careers and album cycles and what they're doing. And one of the things I always like are the conversations about which songs to pitch for radio, specifically out of 12 to 15 songs on an album. Which ones will be the golden egg of radio? Is there any through line that you see in the songs that you end up picking for your personal airplay, or is it just kind of whatever you're feeling?
No, I mean, I think there's there's a little bit of DNA to the sound, even though it's a pretty broad thing, you guys know, but there is a little bit of a fit and not fit. And sometimes that's really hard to put your finger on. But I'll say, I think one of the more interesting things now that I'm sure you're hearing in those conversations is where a song can take off in streaming services or in TikTok land or whatever for a different reason. And then sometimes they will chase that as a single in a way that it actually doesn't work on the radio as well, because this is, it's the background of a TikTok video, or it's on a playlist where all the songs sound exactly the same. And that's not dissing either one of those outlets. It's like people are using music in a different way now, right? It's not just purely this passive thing that's on while you're driving or out at the beach or whatever you're doing. It's like, it's a tool people are using. So sometimes when they're trying to pick this single, they're like, it's this song, and it's this super slow ballad that takes 8 minutes to get to the chorus. I'm like, if you put that on right after all these other songs, like that in, radio terms is tune away, someone's going to be like, nope, I'm over here. And so, we've faced that. And when we're sometimes at odds with the label who brings us a single, and they'll be reticent to give us another song.
They should ask us more. They should ask our advice. That's what I say.
Well, and it varies. Look, this is... we've been on other sides of this. I've been in management. I've been in that room going, man, what is the song? And the artist has a say. And so it's not disrespectful in that way to say, okay, I know you didn't just draw this out of a hat. You're not throwing this at us. You spent time and you put what you thought was your best foot forward with this. But sometimes it's not. So sometimes they miss, and
this one showcases my lyricism and my vibrato, and you're like,
and the bass player's like, this is the one I have a co-write on, everybody has their competing things, but I think that is, where we get to be a little bit of an honest, sounding board for this, is that we don't have any skin in any of those games, and we're just listening to it and trying to maintain the ears, not of just curators or whatever, but the ears of the listener. And how does this fit in with everything else that we're doing? So that is some alchemy though. Like figuring out what the single is. I don't know. We put on one the other day that's like half Brazilian orchestral pop and funk or whatever. It's like I didn't order that on the menu, but
I love it.
It was great. Yeah.
There's also, we have the luxury, and if a label says this is the single, we listen to the 4th track in and we say, nah, we're gonna play this one. We like this better, and this is the one that fits for us.
How common is that? I'm assuming there's just so much time in the day. If someone sends you a Dropbox of a 12-track album and they're like, 4 is the one, you're going to listen to 4. And if you're like not feeling it, do you invest?
Okay, I've been doing lots of this not revealing things on this. I will reveal something that is real and that could be, taken the wrong way, but I'm very comfortable with it because I know my process and I know where it comes from. And it is from 30 years of working in music and listening to songs and figuring things out. And when it comes to, we have a group, but when it comes down to it, I'm the last person at the door who decides, if the song goes in or not into the ads, as we said before, ADDS. And no, I don't have time to listen to an entire album or whatever like that, but I have gotten really, really good at being able to skim through and grab a little piece of this, a little piece of that. And the thing is, I think you feel this as a listener too, because I can see someone going, oh, you only spent 20 seconds with my song.
That's all it takes.
But 20 seconds is what most people spend with most songs before they move on. So it's like, there does have to be, and there is that goes back to that magic single sauce. There does have to be a feel that you're able to get pretty quickly, about, and we go through processes where we listen to a song multiple times. Like, is this here? Is this there? Especially when it's reacting with other people. Like, people like this. Okay, why do they like this? Because I don't really get it. I should listen to this again. I don't know everything.
All the time. I feel like I'm the one where like, people like this. And I'm like, I don't. And I say no.
But it'll freak my wife out sometimes because I'm listening in this way that probably seems insane. It's just like, and I go to this other section of the song really quick and boom, oh, that's not it. Go to this other one, this one here. And then whatever kind of helps stop me along the way, then that helps it. And I trust it because I trust my hit rate. Yep. I've had a pretty good one on that. So.
Do you offer that service? If an
artist you know what? Look, let's see what happens next year with all the stuff we were talking about earlier. Might be a consultant. Yeah.
There's a practical aspect to that. That's like, if you have 4 songs, an EP or an album, send the entire folder.
Correct.
With the instructions of where to start.
There's definitely been instances where people are like, I got this new song. And you listen to it and you're like, okay, yeah, it's fine, but it's not a song. It's not the song. Mm-hmm. And then a month later, and this record's clearly been done. A month later, they release the whole record, and you're like, bro, we could have been spending so much more of this. We could have been invested. So that is key. I don't know if mine's quite as quick as yours, but it's not very long with a song before you know, and you do know. Also. Heck, nowadays, the attention span, people are on, I keep bringing up TikTok. I sound like an old lady. This damn TikTok. But,
you're actually on TikTok, though, right?
I'm not posting on TikTok.
But you have
Someone's got to stay hip for us.
I know.
One of us has to do this.
I know.
But the perfect example of a song that you're talking about, these ones that work on TikTok that I don't think work on radio, and I will say a name, Mitski, the song Nobody. That was viral, and people were all about it. And then you listen on the radio, and you're like, this is kind of dragging on. And then it gets to the chorus, you're like, okay, that's fine. But the rest of it, you're like, oh, you really just want that 10 seconds that's in all those TikTok videos. And that is, what a lot of people are doing. That's how they're listening to music.
You're not saying it's a bad song. You're saying
it's a great song. It's just not necessarily a radio song. Right. It is a TikTok song.
Right.
And it's different. And again, that goes back to the there's too many games you got to play. There's too many pieces of the puzzle that you should now have to figure out, which honestly sucks.
Well, and Michael, something you said earlier at the very, very beginning was about monoculture and in radio terms, familiarity. People call them familiars. And, and that really is like a term that is somewhat outdated. I was on a panel a couple of years ago and someone was like, blah, blah, familiars. And then I went, familiar to who?
Right. Yeah.
So that gets into demographics, that gets into history. Like there are, we'll have these discussions about R&B songs from the 90s. And frankly, if you're a white person from the 90s, you most likely did not hear some of these songs. But they were huge, right? And so you get into that really, really quickly, and especially now without any sort of crossover culture as much as we used to have. There's still people who have not heard Chapel Roan, right? Like it's not. There's no way for anything to be so ubiquitous outside of Shabuzi for,
I thought you were going to say Lil Nas X again. I was really ready. You kept circling back to him. I was like, man, I did not know you were such a fan.
I keep up.
Wow.
Shabuzi is your example. Keeping up. He says he keeps up. And this man, I swear to you, we are in the throes of espresso. Sabrina, like, doing her thing. And Jason's like, I've never heard that song. And I said, I don't believe that for a second.
I hadn't.
It is. You have heard it in the background somewhere.
No.
You have heard a whisper, a tinge of it as a car drove by.
No.
I was like, I refuse to believe you've never heard a second of this.
No, I never. Well, that was a perfect example.
So
of
I said, play.
No. And I love pop music. So it's not, it wasn't like, ooh, God, Sabrina Carpenter. It was truly, that was to me a great example of a moment where, depending on where you are, and if I was still a parent of a young kid, I would have heard it. But we no longer consume that. I'm not at the grocery store as much anymore or whatever. Like the places that I would have tangentially heard it. Whereas, Shabuzi happened to be hitting me because I watch sports and they use it as bumper music, and my son liked it and we were at an event and it played and he's like, I like this song. It can still reach you and there's still crossover there, but like because that doesn't exist as much, it is a challenge when we put together playlist on what is familiar when we're trying to pull in songs that aren't just, you can't just play nothing but new all the time. It would,
sure.
People just are like, no. So,
and I appreciate that big time because there are so many. I heard a 1980s songs by the Corgis. Do you know that Beck song, Everybody's Got to Learn Sometime?
Yeah.
That's a cover, which I did not know, by a band called the Corgis. And I listened to the original and was like, oh, the original is very cool. I'll listen to this whole album. I listened to the whole album. I was like, man, that record's very good. And it ends with a song that has dog barking samples in it, which to me is a huge win. Huge win.
That's the one. That's what sold you.
And it was part of a Christmas single too.
Oh,
so
now you got me. Now I'm locked in.
So I was like locked into this, but like, oh, this is, if this was a Spotify playlist, I would never encounter it because they do not care about something the moment it is released.
And also music discovery isn't just new music. There is the entire, I talk a lot about how like the 80s skipped it. My parents didn't care about it. I was not alive. So I was just like, all that's crap. I was like, I hate it all. And this man, Jason, has been like, it's not all crap. And I'm going to prove to you that it is not all crap.
There is a lot of bad, though.
There is a lot of bad, and I stand by that. And I will say that with my full chest. However, I have been pleasantly surprised, and I'll listen to a show, and I'm like, what is that? And I'm like, okay, that not all of those songs are bad. I like that. And so it's not just music discovery. I feel like people get caught in this thing of like, oh, all this new music.
Right.
It was impossible for all of us to keep up with everything all the time. And everyone has gaps in their list. If you're like a diehard music fan, you know stuff from decades and decades ago. Everyone has a gap and they have personal taste. And what is so fun is that we have this ragtag team of people who all, yes, we all have great taste, but it's all like slightly different. Mm-hmm. And we come from different backgrounds. And so, Marquise will be like, this was a huge R&B song. And I'm like, I've never heard that. And I refuse to believe that that's true. But, we all come from different parts of life, and we're introducing each other to new music that isn't necessarily new per se.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really special thing that we get to do too. That again, an algorithm's not going to do that. Nope. It's not new. You're out. It's over.
For sure. Well, what else we got here? I think we're at a good moment.
Yeah, this was such a fun conversation.
It is very good.
I feel like we could go on, but I don't want to drag it out too long.
Look, I want to respect people's time.
Yes. Is there anything major that you were curious about as far as like operationally that we did not cover?
I mean, hours of discussion of like, what does a week look like at the station? And like, what are the meetings? And like,
how do you get into it? What are you coming from? Just like a music fan perspective? Are you coming from like, are these people out of journalism?
You're right. That is a whole other hour.
You could do an abbreviated.
Well, I will say there is one thing that we do face right now that you wouldn't think would be as much of a challenge, which is finding people who are not only interested in being on the air, but then have the chops to do it because, and I have podcasted, so it's not about that. It's I went into this when we launched the station and I was assembling the team. I thought, I'm going to have a whole lot more to pull from because everybody's got a microphone these days and everybody will be more comfortable. They'll know some of the basic things about it. But we found this really interesting fact is that there's a huge difference between you sitting down and you're talking to a microphone about this thing that you know and you're interested in, and us talking to you, us essentially working with you to be a DJ to talk about some things that you don't know, or to be included in a group and to feel very comfortable in that not knowing. And so sometimes it's been difficult to find DJs in a way that it wasn't in that would be a big difference between now and like 1995. Whereas there was college radio that really helped people develop as broadcasters, which is a different skill and something that seems easy and feels easy. And then you look back and you're like, oh, okay, it took me years to get to the point that I am, doing this. And that system doesn't really exist as much anymore. There are college stations, but that as a function of supporting the broadcast as a job doesn't work as much anymore.
It's also having to follow you, who's been doing this forever. I listened to Jason on the way home. I'm like, damn, how does he do that? I will never. I'm like, wow, that's really, and I'll just listen. I'm like, I should take notes. This is really good. I got to rip that off sometime.
Yeah, it definitely seems like an insane skill to just.
And that's what it is. And it's one that, to Jason's point, it takes a long time. And I would argue that, I will say that a lot of times if you do not have a traditional sounding voice, you're not necessarily given the opportunities to figure that out. I wasn't. And I come on, I'm like, I know I sound like a small child. I look like one too. I was like, it matches my entire existence. And having people in leadership say, yeah, we want you to sound like that, though. We want you to sound like yourself.
I know when it's
no
you.
one, right?
And I love that.
Yeah.
They're like, no one wants you to put on some type of radio voice. It is hey, be yourself. And that is, I'll say that I feel very lucky, but I think that's a problem is that, especially for minority individuals, if you don't sound like this sophisticated white man, they don't want to put you on the radio. And so I think that also goes into finding, I remember being like, wow, there's no women applicants. I'm like, yeah, because they've never had a shot at this ever. And so, that's something that I'll say.
I think that's a problem of capitalism. The more I think about it, this dependency
White men?
on, what? Let me start from the core of the issue. No, but this dependency on, familiarity and getting people to I think maybe that's why music publications aren't really like cool anymore, because we could tell they started just needing clicks, and we don't like that. But when people start feeding into what they think is already accepted, to make sure that their income streams remain flowing, making everyone happy, that's investing in them. And that I think I keep hoping is breaking, but as we saw and I don't want to bring up the election, but that's kind of what the perpetuality of what's familiar. It's hard to break out of it because we're so dependent on the income streams that kind of helps solidify.
For sure.
Yeah. I'd love to, we'll get one more person in here. We'll talk about country radio and its evolution. It's fascinating. It really is, like how it works.
Also how
where
it's
it functions.
Still, where it's not dying. Where radio is probably never going to die is country radio.
Right. But there's so many things that have happened just in the last few years that have blown up, like massive artists that they don't play still. To your point about, I don't know, when you were talking about that, I thought, familiarity within that realm and the gatekeepers there. Now, this is me outside of that business, but I know people in it, and I see and I go, man, why don't they play like Zach Bryan? Like, we're not necessarily going to play that, but he's someone who, like, what is country, gets into that thing, and then what is country now? Like, he sounds like that, and obviously he's not alone. There's so many of those guys that are like hitting a nerve. It's why like you've seen some of these numbers that have been coming out at the very end of the year from TikTok and Spotify and places like that, and what's increased and what's decreased. And country consumption in places that normally did not consume it has really grown. But I think it becomes also like, we live in Nashville, and so
what are you calling country?
Yeah.
Because here we're
I'm wearing a Jason Isbell shirt.
Right, and to me, I'm like, that's country.
that.
But other people are like, no, it's country. It's country radio. It is the bars on Broadway. It is those folks. That's country.
But I think in the broader terms, from a data standpoint, they are including Jason Isbell, and they are, they put Jason Isbell and Zach Bryan and Shabuzi and all that under one umbrella, and then it makes you go like, well, yeah, kind of, why isn't it? I don't know.
People are kind of obsessed with kind of slicing and dicing all of those genres too, and it's that is a conversation that's a whole other podcast. Our talking shit podcast. That's a whole other one. This one's a whole other podcast.
We started several podcasts on this episode, and it's great.
You have a network.
I look forward to the hour-long tutorial on how to pitch to radio.
Yep. Honestly, that's a TikTok series that I think could really launch you into viral.
I probably should. I haven't. I've threatened people at work about getting on TikTok and doing some things, but I haven't done it yet because I also am like, I don't need to check another thing. I don't need to know who's watching me again. Instagram's enough where you get that validation of like who's watching the stuff.
You be the puppet master.
I could be. I'm a great puppet master. I'm very good at that.
Well, I'm going to do it off air too, but just while we're on the mic, thank you for being here, and thank you for the service that you provide to people who, whether it's passively listening in the car or people who really go out of their way to discover new music and appreciate someone sifting through all the thousands and thousands of songs every day. I appreciate what you do, and long live radio.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's awesome.
We appreciate you very much.
Thanks for listening to Devalued. For more information about our podcast, please visit devalued.show.